Every one of the few can be named. Most never flew a Spitfire. Britain built fighters faster than the Luftwaffe could destroy them. Aircraft were never the problem. By September, Fighter Command was running out of the one thing a factory cannot build. And I will show you the exact week the arithmetic failed. I went through the entire roll. All 2,944 names, 544 of them were dead inside 16 weeks. Across the channel, the barges were already loading. You know this as the Spitfire's finest hour. Most of those kills are credited to a different fighter. Start with the number. Even the number is contested. Kenneth Wynn's roll lists 2,927 men. The monument on the Victoria embankment has 2,939 names cut into bronze. The Battle of Britain. Monument Trust's own database now runs to 2,944. 3 authoritative sources, 3 answers. That isn't sloppiness. Qualifying had nothing to do with heroism. It was paperwork. A man had to fly at least one authorized operational sortie with an eligible unit between the 10th of July and the 31st of October 1940. One sortie. Fly a single patrol on the 12th of July, see nothing, land, and you're on the list. Fly every day for 16 weeks and get shot down 3 times, same clasp, same roll. But that rule is why the number still moves. Every time a logbook comes out of an attic in Shropshire, the roll gets longer. And they were not all British. 16 nationalities flew in the Battle of Britain. The largest foreign contingent was Polish, 144 men. Then 129 New Zealanders, 91 Canadians, 87 Czechoslovaks, 27 Belgians, 23 South Africans, 21 Australians on the official roll, though Australian historians have argued for years that the true figure is higher because men who joined the RAF directly were logged as British. 13 Free French, 10 Irishmen from a country that was formerly neutral, and 7 Americans risking their own citizenship to be there more than a year before the United States entered the war. On the 20th of August 1940, Churchill stood up in the House of Commons and said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. Here is what gets lost." He said it early. The 20th of August was before the worst of it. 4 days later, the Luftwaffe stopped hunting convoys and started hunting airfields. In the fortnight after that tribute, Fighter Command came closer to collapse than at any other point in the war. Churchill was thanking them for a victory that had not happened yet. The bill came in like this: 544 pilots killed, 422 wounded, 1,547 aircraft destroyed. Fighter Command's figures. Wood and Dempster, in the narrow margin, count it differently. 481 pilots killed, missing or taken prisoner, and 1,173 aircraft written off. Historians still argue over the gap. Nobody argues about the shape of it. Roughly 1 man in 3 on that roll was killed or wounded in 16 weeks. But before any of these men mattered, 3 aircraft did. 2 British, 1 German. And the reputation of all 3 is wrong. 3 aircraft decided this. All 3 have the wrong reputation. The Spitfire was the thoroughbred, 355 miles an hour at 19,000 feet. 8 Browning .303 machine guns, 350 rounds apiece. That's about 15 seconds of continuous fire before all 8 run dry. 15 seconds. That is the entire ammunition load of the most famous fighter in history. But in July 1940, there were only 19 Spitfire squadrons. and when one came home whole, it stayed on the ground. The Spitfire was a monocoque. The skin carries the load, like an eggshell rather than a tent frame. Beautiful, light, and slow to patch. Days, not hours. The Hurricane was the opposite. Steel tube frame under fabric, a design that already looked dated in 1940. 32 squadrons, 20mm shells went through the fabric without finding enough resistance to detonate. Ground crews patched it overnight, and it was the better gun platform. Thicker wing, steadier in the burst. With 8 machine guns and 15 seconds of ammunition, steady was worth more than fast. Which is why, in the kill split for the battle, the Hurricane is generally credited with somewhere between 55% and 60% of the total. The Spitfire gets the rest. That figure needs handling. RAF victory claims in 1940 were inflated. Stephen Bungay puts it at a factor of 2 or 3, and the Hurricane had more opportunities because there were nearly twice as many of them in the air. But correcting for both does not change the conclusion. The aircraft that did the heavy work is the one that is not on the poster. The Hurricane did have a problem. Above 18,000 feet, the Messerschmitt beat it at everything: speed, climb, acceleration in the dive. Up there, the Hurricane could not chase anybody, and the Messerschmitt Bf 109E, the Emil, was the better aircraft on almost every number. Faster to 20,000 feet, higher ceiling. And it carried something no British fighter had: 2 20mm cannon in the wings. A cannon hit does not punch a hole in an aircraft, it takes it apart. But those cannon held 60 rounds per gun. 6.5 seconds of fire, and the Emil dragged one flaw that no amount of performance could cover. Fuel. From the airfields around the Pas de Calais, a 109 arrived over London with roughly 10 minutes to spare before it had to turn for home. 10 minutes. If the fight ran long, or a pilot lost track of the clock, the engine stopped over the channel. The Luftwaffe lost pilots drowned in cold water in undamaged aircraft, with nobody having fired at them. Britain, meanwhile, was building around 470 fighters a month. Germany was producing a fraction of that. Beaverbrook had taken over the Ministry of Aircraft Production on the 14th of May and cancelled everything that was not a fighter. Aircraft, again, were never the problem. The problem had names, and the first of them was a New Zealander who was shot down 7 times. On the 9th of July 1940, Al Deer shot down a Messerschmitt over the Channel and turned to look for another one. It was already coming at him, head on. Neither man moved. The 2 aircraft met at a closing speed of over 600 miles an hour. The German, Oberfeldwebel Johann Illner of JG-51, went into the sea. Deer's propeller blades folded backwards. His engine died. Most of his rudder tore away, and the cockpit filled with smoke. He glided the wreck to the English coast and put it down in a field near Manston, where it slid into a stone wall and caught fire. He smashed his way out with his bare hands and walked away with cuts and burns. That was the first one. Over the course of the war, Al Deer was shot down or wrecked 7 times. 22 years old. A law clerk from Wanganui, New Zealand, who paid his own way into the Royal Air Force. But nobody was over the Channel by accident. They were there for coal. Britain ran on coal. Homes burned it, factories burned it, and London and the southeast got theirs by sea, convoys creeping down the coast from Wales and Scotland. Eastbound they were CE. Westbound, CW. Stop the colliers and the lights go out in the capital. So on the 30th of June, Göring turned his bomber fleets onto the shipping lanes. But the convoys were the bait. What Germany actually wanted was fighter command, dragged out over open water. Because a German pilot who bailed out over France was back on his airfield that evening. A British pilot who bailed out over the Channel usually wasn't recovered at all. Britain's answer wasn't an aircraft. It was a telephone network. The Dowding system worked like a nervous system. The radar stations along the coast were the nerve endings. Everything they saw went to one filter room at Bentley Priory, where it was sorted into a single moving picture of the sky, then pushed down to group, then sector, then to a controller with a radio talking a squadron onto a target. Before this, fighters flew standing patrols and found the enemy somewhere between 30 and 50% of the time. With it, interception rates ran as high as 90. But look at the margin. On a large raid, radar gave about 15 minutes of warning. A Spitfire needed 9 of them just to reach 20,000 feet. The whole battle fitted in what was left. 6 minutes. July cost Fighter Command 74 pilots killed or missing. Painful. But on the 3rd of August, Dowding was only 124 pilots short of establishment. Remember that number. And then there was the professional. Adolf Mallen, a South African who had gone to sea as a boy on a training ship, which is why nobody in the RAF ever called him anything but sailor. Mallen is remembered for the 10 rules of air fighting that ended up pinned to dispersal hut walls across Fighter Command. Wait until you can see his eyes. Never fly straight and level for more than 30 seconds. Height gives you the initiative. And the last one, go in quickly, punch hard, get out. He had earned those rules the hard way. On the 6th of September, 1939, days into the war, Mallen's flight was scrambled onto a radar contact, misidentified it, and shot down 2 RAF Hurricanes. There were courts martial. The man who taught Fighter Command how to fight opened his war by killing his own side. By the 11th of August, his squadron was one of the best in the RAF. But on the 24th of August, the Luftwaffe stopped hunting ships. It started hunting airfields. On the 16th of August, a 23-year-old Hurricane pilot named James Nicholson dived on a formation of bombers near Southampton without seeing what was behind him. 4 cannon shells went through his aircraft. 2 of them wounded him. Another punctured the gravity tank, which sits directly in front of the instrument panel between the pilot's knees and the engine. The cockpit turned into a fireball. Nicholson opened the hood to jump. And as he lifted himself out of the seat, he saw a Messerschmitt cross in front of him. He got back in. He sat back down in a burning aircraft, pressed the firing button, and kept firing until the German went down. Only then did he bail out. His citation records, serious burns to his hands, face, neck, and legs. 81 years of Royal Air Force, 2 World Wars, and Fighter Command's Victoria Cross is that one. A single award. His. But while Nicholson was burning, the Luftwaffe was still attacking the wrong things. Ships, radar masts, coastal strips, nuisance targets. On the 24th of August, they stopped getting it wrong. That day, the Luftwaffe turned its main effort onto the sector stations of 11 Group. Not the aircraft, the nervous system. Each sector station was an operations room full of controllers, telephones, and plotting maps. Destroy the room and the fighters still fly, but they fly blind. Biggin Hill took 6 raids in 3 days. In the worst of them, 3 Women's Auxiliary Air Force members, Sergeant Joan Mortimer, Corporal Elspeth Henderson, and Sergeant Helen Turner stayed at their posts while the bombs came down. Mortimer then went out and flagged the unexploded ones. All three were awarded the military medal. Now the arithmetic of those 2 weeks. Between the 24th of August and the 6th of September, Fighter Command lost 103 pilots killed and 128 seriously wounded. Out of roughly 1,000 operational pilots, close to a quarter were gone in 15 days. The replacements numbered 260 men fresh out of training. Many of them hadn't finished the course. So while the system cracked, the RAF started fighting itself. North of London at Duxford, Douglas Bader, the pilot who flew on 2 metal legs, had convinced his superior, Lee Mallory, that the answer was to mass 5 squadrons into one enormous formation. The Big Wing. 60 fighters at once. But assembling 60 fighters takes time, and radar only bought 15 minutes. While the Big Wing climbed and sorted itself out, the bombs were already falling on Park's airfields. The Big Wing's victory claims were enormous. They were also demonstrably, wildly exaggerated. Nobody examined them closely at the time, and those inflated numbers were used to question the tactics of the man actually holding the line. And still the Germans understood none of it. On the 17th of August, Luftwaffe intelligence calculated the RAF had around 300 serviceable fighters left. The real number was 855 serviceable, inside a total of 1,438. Twice what it had been in early July. German pilots had a grim running joke. Every time the British fighters appeared, somebody would say over the radio, "Here come the last 50 Spitfires again." They had the aircraft wrong. They didn't have the idea entirely wrong, because Dowding was running out of men. And in November 1940, weeks after winning the battle, he was removed from his command against his wishes. Park was moved out of 11 Group. 2 Big Wing supporters replaced them. On the 7th of September, though, the airfields stopped burning. The Luftwaffe turned towards London, and that saved Fighter Command at exactly the moment the least celebrated men in this story reached the front line. On the 13th of September 1940, a German bomb hit Buckingham Palace. The King and Queen were inside. The man sent after that bomber was a 23-year-old sergeant from Yorkshire named James Lacey. Everybody called him Ginger for the hair. The weather was foul. Unbroken cloud, horizon to horizon. They sent him up through it, knowing perfectly well that once he was above it, he would not find his airfield again on the way back. He went anyway. He found the Heinkel. He shot it down, and then, with no ground visible anywhere, he took to his parachute. Ginger Lacey wasn't an officer. He hadn't been to Cranwell. He was a civilian flying instructor who enlisted as a sergeant, and across the months of the Battle of Britain, he shot down 18 German aircraft, making him the most effective Hurricane pilot of the entire campaign. There's the pattern again. The aircraft that isn't on the poster, flown by men who aren't either. But the men who had come furthest were somebody else. When Poland fell, its pilots didn't surrender. They went to France. When France fell, they went to Britain. 8,000 Polish airmen arrived on the island, having already lost 2 wars in a row. And the RAF didn't want them. There was open skepticism about their flying. They were made to learn English, to learn imperial measurements, to learn British procedure. And while Fighter Command bled through August, 145 Polish fighter pilots sat on the ground, training. 303 Squadron broke that rule from an aircraft in flight. On the 30th of August, still officially non-operational, the squadron was running a training exercise over London, a practice attack on a British bomber. And Flying Officer Ludwik Paskiewicz saw something real in the distance. He called it in. Nobody answered. So he broke formation on his own authority, went after the Messerschmitt, and shot it down. The next day, 303 Squadron was declared operational. What they did afterwards is the most quoted statistic of the whole battle, and it needs handling. Officially, 303 claimed 126 German aircraft in 6 weeks, the highest claimed total of any RAF squadron, and they'd started halfway through. But 1940 claims were inflated everywhere, and theirs were too. When the historian John Alcorn checked German records against British ones, he verified 44 victories for 303. That drops them from first place to fourth. And yet here is what the revision doesn't take away. Even on the corrected figure, 303 had the best kill-to-loss ratio of any squadron in the Battle of Britain. 2.8 to 1. The men the RAF hadn't wanted to let fly turned out to be the most efficient it had. They paid for it. 7 pilots killed, 5 badly wounded, 18 Hurricanes lost. And among the dead, on the 27th of September, was Ludwik Paskiewicz, the man who broke formation. They weren't alone. 87 Czechoslovaks flew in the battle too, their own country occupied, with no realistic prospect of going home. And one of them, a sergeant flying with 303 without being Polish, would end September with more victories than any other man in the squadron. We'll come back to him. Meanwhile, they kept arriving from the far side of the world. Colin Gray, a New Zealander, from the same squadron as Al Deer, and the same ship out. He'd finished the war as New Zealand's highest-scoring fighter pilot. None of these men had to be there. None of them was defending his own country. And on the 15th of September, every one of them took off on the same day. On the 15th of September, the RAF announced it had shot down 185 German aircraft in a single day. It hadn't. The real count, made after the war against German records, is somewhere around 60. They won anyway. Because the Luftwaffe's problem was never the number, it was that British fighters kept coming, wave after wave, after a full month of German intelligence insisting they were finished. 2 days later, on the 17th of September, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion. But the man who shot down the most German aircraft that month wasn't British, wasn't Polish, and had no country left to go back to. Józef František was Czech. His nation ceased to exist in March 1939, so he went to Poland. Poland fell, so he went to France. France fell, and he came ashore at Falmouth on the 21st of June 1940. He asked to fly with the Poles. They sent him to 303, and he was, quite simply, impossible to command. He broke formation constantly to go hunting alone. His commander, Witold Urbanović, found the only workable answer. He formally declared František a guest of the squadron. Let him fly on his own, if that's what it takes. What he did with it was wait over the channel for Germans heading home. Out of ammunition, low on fuel, too low to maneuver. Between the 2nd and the 30th of September, František shot down 17 aircraft. 28 days. On the 8th of October, he took off from Northolt at 9 in the morning on a routine patrol with 11 other aircraft. At 9:40, he crashed at Cuddington Way in Ewell, Surrey. The other 11 came home. Nobody has ever established what happened. It was the day after his 26th birthday. The top scorer of the entire battle, with 21, was a 5'3" Englishman they called Sawn-Off Lockie. Eric Locke went missing over France in August 1941. His body was never found. And now the SUM that explains all of it. On the 17th of August, at the worst moment, the RAF had 855 serviceable fighters, twice what it had in July. Beaverbrook's factories were winning the industrial war comfortably. Now look at the other column. To find pilots, Fighter Command cut the operational training unit course from 4 weeks to 2. Some of the men coming out of it reached their squadrons with 10 hours on the fighter they were about to fly. Many had never fired their guns at all. In the 4 weeks ending the 2nd of September, the 3 units produced 280 pilots. In those same 4 weeks, Fighter Command took 348 casualties. 280 in, 348 out. A net loss of 68 men in a month, with the pilot factory running at double speed. And the new ones died first. The mortality was concentrated in a novice pilot's first 5 sorties. They sent them up with 10 hours, and plenty of them never reached the 6th. The average age of an RAF fighter pilot in 1940 was 20. The average age of the ones who died was 22. Remember August, when Dowding was only 124 pilots short? That was the easy part. Britain never ran out of Spitfires. It never ran out of Hurricanes. It had aircraft parked in storage units that nobody was left to fly. What nearly ran out was the one thing no factory on Earth could produce in a fortnight, however many contracts Beaverbrook cancelled. 20-year-olds willing to climb into a cockpit knowing the arithmetic. And that is what Churchill actually saw on the 20th of August, 4 days before the worst of it started. He wasn't counting aircraft, he was counting people. And he knew the sum didn't work. When the official roll closed on the 31st of October 1940, it held 2,927 names. Today it holds 2,944, and it is still growing, because every few years a logbook turns up in an attic. Someone carries it to the Battle of Britain Monument Trust, and a man who has been on no list for 80 years goes on to one. But there's a number that never made it onto any roll at all. While the fighter pilots were being named, Bomber Command lost 718 men in those same 16 weeks. More dead than Fighter Command. Many of them flying against the invasion barges massed in the Channel ports. Nobody wrote them a sentence. And in 1940, Britain had all but stopped building bombers in order to survive. What it built, once it had survived, was the aircraft that broke the Ruhr dams. The Lancaster ran to more variants than almost anyone knows exist. That's the video on screen now. Go and watch it.